They thought their new life was safe when he moved his mistress into my home. But the quiet woman they discarded still held the deed. I used an obscure law and a secret trail of hidden assets to force a sale, cash out $370,000, and leave them both bankrupt and facing collection on a co-signed debt. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The betrayal came disguised as a polite conversation over cooling coffee. Victor, my husband of 27 years, pushed a pristine white envelope across the mahogany kitchen table, the one where I used to pack his lunches and balance our accounts. He did not look at me. He just stared past the steam from his mug, past the life we built, and mumbled the verdict. Alara, I think we've outgrown each other. Outgrown? The word hit me like a physical blow. Like I was an old coat he suddenly found unfashionable. I was 50 years old. For 27 years, I had put my career in banking on hold when our son, Leo, was born. Someone had to have stable hours. I had run the house, cooked every meal, managed the budget, and even cared for his sick mother for 2 years. My only return request was loyalty, and now I had divorce papers instead. I did not scream. My jaw locked. I simply pushed the envelope back. You can save the monologue, Victor. What's the price? He flinched. He was expecting tears, not negotiation. He moved out by the end of the month, claiming he needed space. But I knew the truth before the echoes of his rolling suitcase faded. He didn't check into a hotel. He moved in with Sylvie Thorne, the woman he introduced to me 2 years prior as a co-worker from accounting. She was 34, the same age as our son, Leo. The whispers followed me like cheap perfume. Victor and Sylvie were suddenly everywhere, smiling on beaches, posing with wine glasses in coastal wine country, their new life flashing across my newsfeed like a neon sign of my failure. I was alone in the house I found, the home I poured my first major down payment into after working double shifts at Riverbank. The furniture was mine, the memories were mine, but the quiet was deafening. Leo, our 25-year-old son, tried to play the reluctant mediator. Mom, I don't want to take sides, he told me over the phone, his voice tight with guilt. You don't have to, I replied, my voice steady, though my hand was trembling against the receiver. I already know where everyone stands. The true moment of escalation arrived on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't a document from Victor's lawyer. It was an envelope printed on sickly sweet, bubblegum pink stationery, sealed with a ridiculous sticker of 2 interlocking hearts. The outside address was typed, but the signature was handwritten. The letter inside was short, printed in a flowery script. Dear Alara, it read, using my full name as a slight, please schedule a time to collect the rest of your belongings. Victor and I are settling in, and we'd prefer to start this new chapter without interruptions. Mornings are best. Sylvie Thorne. Sylvie. She had the audacity to call me an interruption in my own home. My house. My blood, sweat, and tears house. My tea, sitting on the granite countertop I selected, went instantly cold. My fingers clenched around the pink paper. This was not about sadness anymore. This was a flare of pure, ice-cold fury. I went straight to the property documents locked in the fireproof safe. We bought the house together, but I was the one who had the cash for the majority of the down payment. Victor had been between jobs, full of promises. He never bothered to refinance or remove my name from the title. He called it a hassle. I saw it as a lifeline. I immediately called my oldest friend, Anya, a lawyer for nearly 20 years. She knew me better than anyone. I didn't mince words. I read the pink letter aloud. There was a long silence on the line. Then Anya's voice came through, low and sharp. Ella, is your name still on the title? On the deed? Yes. I confirmed, clutching the phone. He never changed it. And he never bought you out of your half? Not even in theory? No. Anya inhaled slowly. Then you don't have to ask for anything. You own half that house. We can file a partition action. We can force a sale. They can either pay you out immediately or they lose the house. My mind went blank for a second. Then one question cut through the fog. If they can't afford to buy me out, will they have to leave? They will be given a 60 days deadline, Anya stated. If they fail to comply, the house is sold from under them. Yes, they will have to leave. I looked out the window at the familiar curve of the driveway. The betrayal felt monumental, but the legal mechanism was simple. They had tried to erase me. I would erase the foundation of their new life. File it, I ordered. Turn up the heat. Victor called 2 days later, his voice tight and defensive. Ella, is this true? Did you hire Anya? Why are you trying to make this harder? I'm just returning the favor, Victor, I said. My voice was calm, which was worse than yelling. He tried to hit me with the emotional blackmail. You're bitter. Sylvie doesn't feel comfortable with you being around the house. Then maybe, I said, letting the silence hang. She shouldn't be living in a house that still has my name on the title. I hung up before he could argue. The satisfaction was immediate, sharp, like the first taste of adrenaline. I knew he would try to minimize the situation to Sylvie, pretend it was just a misunderstanding. I wouldn't give him that chance. The legal petition was filed that afternoon, clean, airtight, and unshakable. I was making moves, not noise. The next day, I pulled into the driveway. My spot. Sylvie's white coupe was parked right in the middle. The sight of it, entitled and cheap, was the last piece of proof I needed. I didn't knock. I used the key Victor forgot I still had. He had been too lazy to change the locks. I walked into my old living room. The beige paint, the framed quotes, good vibes only. It was a rental set, sterile and fake. They had stripped out my life, but they couldn't strip out my legal standing. I was there, as instructed by the pink letter, to pick up the last of my things. I opened the pantry. My favorite spice rack was gone, replaced by a row of artisanal sugars. The fire in my chest surged. I walked toward the den. That's when I heard footsteps. Sylvie came down the stairs, wearing one of Victor's old faded t-shirts, the one he wore when he coached Leo's little league team. She froze mid-step when she saw me, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, the surprise quickly melting into entitled anger. "I came to get my things," I said, holding up the crumpled pink note. "You were supposed to schedule a time. We have rules now, boundaries," she snapped, taking a step toward me. I walked past her, slow and deliberate, my shoes silent on the pale wooden floor they had installed. "Sweetheart," I said, not raising my voice, "as long as my name is on this house, I will come and go as I please." Her face went from flushed to crimson. "Victor will hear about this." "Good," I answered. "Tell him. And while you're at it, ask him why he never changed the locks." I packed a few boxes, mostly sentimental things, knowing I would never truly live here again. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. Bridget followed me, a cross-armed whispering shadow. "Pathetic," she muttered just loud enough for me to hear. I stopped. The sound of my own blood rushing was louder than her whisper. "Excuse me?" She straightened up, pushing out her chest. "You couldn't hold on to your husband, so now you're playing petty games. You're jealous because he wanted someone better." I looked at her, really looked at the brittle confidence in her eyes. "Better doesn't last, Sylvie," I said softly, "and I'm not playing games. I'm claiming what's mine. You wanted drama? You're getting legal." Then I turned to leave. My dignity felt heavy, restored. As I slid the key back into my coat pocket, I caught sight of the mudroom door. Taped to the inside, barely visible, was a small laminated receipt, dated 3 days after Victor filed for divorce. It detailed a $12,500 purchase order for a specialized air filtration system. It was a receipt for something expensive, something Victor never told me about, and something I knew had nothing to do with this house. What else did he hide? I wondered, my fingers twitching to peel the receipt off. But I left it. Knowing its very existence meant Victor had assets he hadn't disclosed to the court. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. I heard her shriek from inside, a sound of frustration and defeat, but the lock held firm. I didn't steal the receipt, but I took something far more important. The knowledge that the financial secrets were far deeper than just the house deed. And the one thing I was certain of when I pulled away from that house for the last time, the thing that chilled me to the bone, was that Sylvie would find that receipt when she went to take out the trash, and she would know I saw it. The court papers were delivered the next morning. Anya had handled the filing. The system would deliver the slap. The petition for partition was a cold, hard legal document that cut through Victor and Sylvie's fantasy like a serrated knife. Their new chapter began not with "I do," but with a legal threat. Victor called 4 times, but I kept my phone silent. He left a message, his voice a tight, high whine. "Alara, what are you doing? This is insane. You're forcing us to sell the house after everything I've done for you." I laughed out loud in my quiet rental unit. Everything he'd done for me? I sacrificed my promotion, managed the house, and financially stabilized his inconsistent career. He hadn't done anything for me. He had simply let me do the work for us. When I finally picked up 2 days later, his tone had shifted from angry entitlement to forced composure. "Alara, we need to talk. Why are you doing this?" "Doing what, Victor? Forcing the sale of a house I still legally own? You know, the house you moved your mistress into before the ink on our divorce was dry." He stammered. "We can't afford to buy you out right now. You know that." "Then you should have thought about that before you moved Sylvie in," I finished for him. He dropped the confrontation for the soft, familiar guilt trip, the one that had worked on me for 27 years. "Alara, you don't need this kind of stress." My spine stiffened. "No, Victor, you don't. And you brought it on yourself." I hung up and immediately blocked his number. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was my silence. 48 hours later, Sylvie called from a blocked number. She wasn't just angry. She was unraveling. Her voice was thin, choked with sobs. "You're ruining us. You're humiliating us. Please, Alara, be a woman about this." The sheer nerve of her, asking me to shoulder her shame. "Being a woman means knowing your worth, Sylvie." I paused, the words precise and cold. "And I'm done shrinking for either of you." I hung up and blocked that number too. The door was sealed. Victor and Sylvie hired a sharp-looking young lawyer named Jensen, who immediately tried to challenge the partition action. I let Anya handle it. Jensen argued that I had abandoned the property and was only pursuing the partition out of malice. The judge cut him off instantly. He looked at the deed, the mortgage, and said the only words that mattered. "Miss Vance remains a legal co-owner. Unless the parties agree to a private buyout, the property must be sold. They have 60 days. Anya smiled fiercely at me across the courtroom. I felt a surge of triumph, but kept my expression flat. I had won the first round, but they still had keys, they still had the kitchen, and they still had the heat. The victory was incomplete. Jensen, Victor's lawyer, approached Anya in the hallway. He didn't waste time. "Your client needs to back down, Anya. She pushes this sale, and my client will file a $50,000 counterclaim for emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty. We know about the unauthorized transfer of funds in July. Anya raised a perfect skeptical eyebrow. Unauthorized transfer? You mean the emergency dental bill she paid using her own account, months before the petition? Good luck with that, Jensen. She shut him down instantly, but the number stuck with me. $50,000. It was a massive financial threat, designed to scare me off. Later that day, Victor showed his hand by posting a vague, rambling message to his social media. Some people don't know when to let go. Bitterness will rot your soul, trying to heal from unnecessary drama. He was attempting to weaponize public opinion. I didn't respond. I simply deactivated my entire social media presence. They couldn't target what they couldn't see. I knew Victor didn't have $50,000 lying around for legal stunts. This threat wasn't about the money. It was about buying time. They were desperate. Anya called me that evening. They're stalling. Jensen's firm is expensive. I need to know everything you have on Victor's financial state in the last 6 months. Did he mention any large, unexpected expenses? Any new business ventures? Only the $12,500 air filtration system, I said, describing the receipt I saw in the mudroom. I left it there, but I took a photo. It was dated 3 days after he filed for divorce. Anya's sharp intake of breath was audible. An air filtration system? For that price? That's not a house expense, Ella. That's a commercial-grade unit. She typed furiously. That's a non-disclosed asset. If we can tie that to a business he started after the separation date, we can invalidate his financial claims. She paused. Ella, I have something else that just came across my desk from the court's discovery portal. It's a statement from Victor's pension fund. It appears he took a disbursement, not a loan, 2 weeks before he moved Sylvie in. My heart hammered against my ribs. A pension disbursement. That was a massive red flag. That was money he should have split with me. The amount is specific, Anya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He cashed out exactly USD 800. It's small, but significant. Why just USD 800? That's not a bill. That's a test. I sat perfectly still, staring at the small, cheap clock on my rental bedside table. Why take an amount that small? Why risk the penalty and the notice for just USD 800? Unless he was testing the system, seeing if he could move money without setting off alarms. The air in my tiny rental suddenly felt charged. This was no longer just about the house. This was about financial crimes, about Victor actively trying to hide our shared wealth. My anger solidified into determination. Anya, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Find out what that USD 800 was used for. I have a feeling he wasn't buying coffee. She agreed. We will, but here is the critical part. The original deed filing, the one that guarantees your partition action, has a date correction in the notary seal. It's nothing major, but Victor's lawyer is now claiming that the correction was fraudulent and invalidates the entire deed. We have to defend the integrity of that tiny mark. The house I had fought for, the foundation of my revenge, was now hanging on a single, messy line drawn by a notary years ago. If they won this small, technical fight, the 60-day clock would stop, and I would be back at square one, fighting for scraps in a standard divorce court. I closed my eyes, picturing the house, the light beige walls, the ridiculous good vibes only sign. They weren't fighting me over the house. They were fighting me over the right to define my reality, and I wouldn't let them win. The court upheld the original deed's validity, but the legal fees had already put a deep trench in Victor and Sylvie's reserves. The 60-day clock was ticking again. I heard through Leo that the tension in my old house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Victor was sleeping on the living room couch, and Sylvie was crying constantly, blaming him for poking the bear. Tell your father I'm not a bear, I instructed Leo, my voice quiet. I'm the deed. I walked past the house one morning. The pristine lawn I used to water was now dry in patches, and there, staked haphazardly near the sidewalk, was a huge amateurish sign, "For sale by owner." My jaw tightened. They were trying to bypass the court-ordered fair market process and rush an under-the-table deal to save on real estate agent fees. They were desperate to claw back some leverage, to sell to a friend or relative for less than market value, just to get me out and buy themselves a cheap apartment. I called Anya immediately. They put up an FSBO sign. They're running a fast one. I expected this, Anya said, her voice calm and measured. But they can't. The court order requires a licensed appraiser's valuation and sale at or above that valuation. It has to be a clean split. No shady deals. I hung up, feeling the need to take action. I drove to the county records office, ostensibly to check my own documents, but really to see the original property valuation. A woman behind the counter, a distant cousin of a woman I used to work with at Riverbank, recognized me. "Mrs. Vance?" she said, her voice dropping. "Saw you in the paper. Tough business." I nodded. "It is." "About your property," she continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "Your husband came in here last week, trying to get a list of registered buyers who don't use agents. Said he was looking for a private fast transfer. Seemed really stressed." I felt a surge of cold triumph. Victor was actively trying to violate the court order by running a secret auction. This was hard evidence of bad faith. I filed a brief administrative note with the county, flagging the property for court-ordered sale compliance. It was an invisible shot, a legal landmine. The very next day, the amateur for sale by owner sign was gone. In its place, professionally staked in the center of the lawn, was a clean, crisp, now listed placard with the name of a reputable agent. I recognized the agency. Anya was good. She had contacted the top listing agent in the area, informed them of the court order, and essentially forced Victor and Sylvie to list the house at fair market value. No cheap escapes. Victor texted me later that afternoon, the message tight and clipped. "We need to talk about the staging. Can you please not remove everything? Sylvie's feeling really exposed right now." The nerve of that man. Exposed? She wasn't feeling exposed when she sent me a note on pink paper telling me to clean out my life. I almost typed a scathing response, but I took a deep breath. Silence was leverage. I forwarded the text to Anya. "Handle it. I won't set foot in that house again." The listing agent, a sharp woman named Ms. Kim, quickly became my operative. She was professional, bound by the court, and now controlled all access to the property. Victor and Sylvie had to keep the house spotless for strangers to walk through and judge their new life. Ms. Kim reported that Sylvie called her in tears, asking to delay visits until they found a new place. I politely reminded her, Ms. Kim told Anya, that this is a court-ordered sale, not a choice, a requirement. The pressure was mounting. Leo called again, this time sounding exhausted. "Mom, they're fighting constantly. Dad is sleeping on the couch most nights. He told Sylvie, this is what happens when you poke a bear." Good. Let them unravel. I was the silent observer, the one who planted the storm and watched it bloom. But then came the escalation I hadn't expected. Anya called, her tone serious. "Ella, about that USD 800 disbursement Victor took. It wasn't for anything random. It was used to register a new limited liability company, an LLC, 2 days before he moved Sylvie in. He named the LLC Thorn Innovations, Sylvie's last name. The air filtration system receipt for $2,500 was almost certainly a business expense, hidden under a new company registered using my shared assets. The financial deception was calculated, not accidental. He was setting up a separate life using my money, I realized, the anger turning into cold, hard resolve. Yes, Anya confirmed, and here's where we get leverage. Jensen, his lawyer, is threatening a $50,000 counterclaim using the old deed issue. But we have proof of Victor's fraudulent asset hiding. We can hit him with a motion to compel discovery, and if he resists, we can ask the judge to sanction him and even temporarily freeze his assets. I felt the ground shift. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. Victor wasn't just replacing me, he was robbing me. I hung up with Anya and found myself staring at a magazine clipping I had saved. An old photo of Victor and me, smiling, standing in front of the house when we first bought it. I ripped it cleanly in half. I had to move faster. I needed more evidence of Victor's financial desperation, proof that he was truly cornered. I called Riverbank, where I used to work, and spoke to a former colleague in the commercial loan department, a woman I'd personally trained. I need a favor, Janice. Off the books. I need to know if Victor has any specific non-joint loans that might be coming due very soon. Something tied only to his LLC or his name. Janice was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, Ayla, I can't give you documents, but I can tell you something I overheard in the back office this morning. Victor took out a personal line of credit last quarter. A substantial amount, tied to a single asset. What asset? I pressed, my heart hammering. His grandfather's fishing boat, which he listed as collateral, Janice murmured. The payment is due next Tuesday. It's not a small payment, Ella. If he defaults, he loses the boat, and the bank initiates collection on the principal against him personally. The amount due by Tuesday is massive. It's $800. Sorry. No. It's far bigger than that. It is tied to the $800 registration fee for the LLC. Janice had mixed up the numbers, but the threat was clear. Victor was on the financial precipice. He had secured a large loan using a sentimental family asset, and he was days away from defaulting. This put a micro clock on his panic. I needed to know the true full amount of that debt. Janice, thank you, I whispered. I owe you one. When I hung up, I knew my life was about to become extremely loud. Victor wasn't just losing the house. He was about to lose his grandfather's boat, and the looming financial collection would destroy his credit. And I had the leverage to ensure the timing was exquisite. The information about that imminent default on the line of credit gave me the hammer I needed. The debt was immense, over USD $8,000 in overdue payments that triggered the repossession clause. The boat, Victor's only remaining sentimental asset outside the house, was at risk. Anya used the USD 800 LLC registration and the $12,500 air filtration system receipt, now tied to Thorn Innovations, to file an emergency motion for a temporary asset freeze against Victor's personal and business accounts. The argument was simple. He was actively hiding and dissipating marital assets under the guise of a new business venture with Sylvie. Victor's lawyer, Jensen, was enraged. He fought it hard, arguing that the LLC was a legitimate, if nascent, business. Anya's rebuttal was brilliant. She didn't argue the business itself. She focused on the timing. Your Honor, the LLC was formed 2 days before he moved his mistress into the marital home using funds taken directly from a shared pension account. This is not business preparation. It is asset shielding, clearly intended to defraud the legal co-owner of the property, Miss Vance. The judge looked tired, but he saw the pattern. He refused a full freeze, but he granted a temporary financial block on any major transactions over $5,000 until the house sale closed. It was enough. The boat was safe from Victor's own panicked actions, but the bank's collection clock was still running, and now Victor couldn't access significant capital to stop it. He was financially immobile. The pressure inside my old house became unbearable. Leo, our son, sounded miserable when we spoke. Mom, she packed up all of Dad's clothes and left them on the front lawn in trash bags. He had to sneak out after dark to bring them in. Tell him that's what happens when you try to build a life on a flimsy foundation, I said, showing no sympathy. I knew I needed to maintain the pressure. I called Janice at Riverbank again, not for information this time, but as the ghost of Victor's past. Janice, I'm calling as a former employee. Victor has a looming default next Tuesday on a line of credit tied to the boat. He's going to call for an extension or a forbearance. If he does, you need to follow policy strictly. Do not grant any favors. He has undisclosed marital liabilities. Janice understood. I was not asking her to break the rules. I was asking her to follow them to the letter. The house viewings began in earnest. Ms. Kim, the listing agent, was a machine. She mandated 2 showings a day, 6 days a week, and required Victor and Sylvie to vacate the premises for all showings. They were forced to live like ghosts in their own home. One afternoon, I drove by and saw Sylvie sitting on the front steps, dressed in an expensive-looking tracksuit, tears streaming down her face as she talked rapidly on her cell phone. The humiliation was public, visible, and constant. She looked up, saw my car idling, and jumped to her feet. I accelerated, leaving her standing there exposed. Later that week, I got a call from a different loan officer at Riverbank, a man named Mr. Thompson. He sounded deeply uncomfortable. Mrs. Vance, I'm calling regarding Mr. Vance's outstanding debt. He tried to initiate an emergency transfer of $6,200 from his business account to cover the missed payment, but the court block prevented the transfer. The tension thickened. Victor was now actively trying to use the $12,500 he hid in Thorn Innovations to save his personal asset, the boat. That's an asset shielding move, Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice sharp. The judge specifically blocked transactions over $5,000 to prevent him from dissipating marital assets before the house sale closes. That money belongs, in part, to me. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. I understand, but Mrs. Vance, he is now claiming that the entire line of credit, the $800 fee, the $12,500 purchase, and the large principal, he is now claiming that Sylvie co-signed all of it, and that she promised to cover the monthly payments from her savings. Twist. Sylvie had co-signed the line of credit. Victor wasn't just dragging himself down, he was actively leveraging Sylvie's non-existent financial stability and dragging her into his personal debt vortex. Did she, Mr. Thompson? I asked, my voice calm, though my knuckles were white. Did she co-sign, or did she simply promise? There's a difference. The signature is on the original document, Mrs. Vance, he confirmed. She is equally liable for the USD $8,000 in overdue payments and the full principal. Me, Mr. Vance is now pointing to a series of digital texts saying she authorized the payments. This changed everything. Sylvie wasn't just a beneficiary of the house. She was now a direct financial liability in Victor's personal debt. And Victor was trying to throw her under the bus to save the boat. I now had leverage over both of them. Thank you for clarifying the co-signer status, Mr. Thompson, I said. I'm sure you'll follow a bank policy on joint liability to the letter. Goodbye. I immediately called Anya. We have the kill shot, Anya. Sylvie is on the co-signed line of credit. Victor is trying to pin the debt on her. We need to let the bank know that the debt is now the direct liability of both parties, right before the house closes. When we cash out, Victor's name is cleared, but Sylvie's is still on the hook for that principal, and she will have no house and no income to pay it. Anya went silent for a beat. Ella. That's cold. They wanted drama, Anya, I said, looking at my own reflection in the dark window. They wanted to ruin me socially and financially. I'm just proving that love doesn't cover collateral. I hung up, the feeling of control immense. The house was just the beginning. The real victory was in watching their shared, fraudulent financial fantasy collapse, piece by piece. The first major offer landed in week 5, 35 days into the 60-day countdown. It was a full asking price, no contingency offer, with an aggressive 2-week closing period. It was exactly what Anya and I had orchestrated. The buyers were a young couple, both Black professionals, expecting their first child. They fell in love with the garden I had spent years cultivating. Monica told me they saw the house as a perfect fresh start. I said, perfect. The house deserved to be happy again. Victor called me 3 times in quick succession. I was at my nail appointment, selecting a shade called brick dust, appropriate for demolition. I let all 3 go to voicemail. Voicemail 1. Anger. Alara, come on. This is bigger than just us. You don't want to do this to the house. Voicemail 2. Desperation. You're really going to let strangers walk into our home and erase everything? After 27 years? Voicemail 3. Manipulation. I know we ended badly, but this is vindictive. You're not leaving us with anything. You're trying to make us homeless. That last line was the first time he admitted their true predicament. You're not leaving us with anything. It confirmed that the debt and the legal fees had drained them entirely. His betrayal had truly matured into a shared catastrophe. I forwarded the voicemails to Anya. They're unraveling. Close the deal. Keep the 2-week closing. The tension peaked on the day of the final walkthrough. Victor and Sylvie had to be out of the house for 4 hours while the buyers checked every last detail. This was the moment of complete forced submission. I heard through Leo that Sylvie was trying to frantically stage the house, fluffing pillows and hiding trash, while Victor was pacing, grumbling about lawyers, paperwork, and me. Ms. Kim, the realtor, told Anya they had requested a brief extension, an extra hour to clean up. The request was denied. There was no more time left. When they walked out that morning, they ceased to be owners. They were simply trespassers holding useless keys. The sale was proceeding, but a complication arose during the title review right before closing. The buyer's title lawyer found a minuscule issue in the original deed, a clerical error on the property line description from 27 years ago, which, while not invalidating the sale, required a final notarized quitclaim signature from both original owners to clear the title completely and guarantee the sale. Without it, the deal would be held up for weeks, jeopardizing the 2-week closing. The original deed was what saved me, and now a tiny flaw in that same document threatened to derail everything. Anya called, exasperated. Ella, Victor has to sign this one last paper. It's nothing, a formality, but without his signature on the corrected document by 4 p.m., the buyer walks. He knows this. He's leveraging the closing. What does he want? I asked, already knowing the answer. He wants half the equity from the house before fees. He says, no more lawyers, no more paperwork. Just give me my $185,000 now and I'll sign. It's a last-minute extortion attempt. I stared at my phone. The final payout was $370,000 after all the fees were split and debts settled. He wanted half of the total sale price, which was double what he was legally entitled to after the financial investigation. He was trying to take back everything I had strategically won. Tell him no, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Tell him he gets nothing until I have the final check in my account, and that includes the money he owes me from the pension disbursement. Anya sighed. He's not bluffing, Ela. He has the pen. The buyer's waiting. It's 2 p.m. now. We have 2 hours. I realized I couldn't trust a lawyer to handle this final personal confrontation. I had to face him one last time, with the final piece of paperwork and force his hand. The pen, the signature, the end. It all had to happen right now. I drove straight to the house, pulling up just as the buyer's car left. The front door was slightly ajar. Victor was still inside, pacing the living room floor, an empty, desolate space with white walls and no photos. He looked hollowed out, wearing a rumpled shirt. He stopped when he saw me. "You're late," he said, his voice flat. "I'm here with the paper, Victor," I said, holding up the corrected quitclaim deed. "Sign this, and it's over. You get your legal half, minus your hidden debt, after the closing, or you walk away with nothing and face asset collection on the boat." He narrowed his eyes. "I want the money, Alara, right now. Half of the final take, or I burn the paper. I won't let you leave us homeless." I stepped into the cold, empty living room, holding the deed like a shield. I had come to watch him sign, but now I had to do something far more terrifying. I had to tell him the truth about his future and the depth of Sylvie's betrayal, which I'd uncovered during the process, and I had 2 hours to make him believe me. Victor needed to sign that paper to save himself, but he needed to realize that the person he was saving wasn't Sylvie, but me. The only way to get his signature was to make him understand that the financial disaster he was facing would only be worse if he held on to her. "Victor," I said, planting my feet, "there's something you don't know about that line of credit. Something that changes everything." I watched his expression shift, anger replaced by a flicker of fear. He took a hesitant step toward me. The clock was ticking, the house sale, my cash out, and their immediate future depended on this single, shaky signature, and I knew I had to push him to the absolute edge. Victor's fear was a sudden, ugly thing. It replaced the arrogance that had been his shield for 27 years. He had been pacing this empty living room, the echo of his footsteps amplifying his panic, but now he stood frozen. "The line of credit?" he choked out, his eyes darting to the corrected quitclaim deed in my hand. "What about it, Alara? You're playing games." "I don't play games, Victor. I only play for keeps," I said, stepping closer. The air in the stripped-down room was cold, carrying the faint smell of stale paint. "The bank's collection clock is ticking. You are overdue on USD 8,000 in payments. The collateral is your grandfather's boat." I paused, letting the sentimental value of that boat sink in. "Your lawyer, Jensen, told the bank that Sylvie co-signed the loan. And she did. The signature is right there on the paper." Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. This was the moment his lie became her cage. He had used her as a human shield against his debts, just as he had used me for 27 years to manage his life. "You leveraged her savings, didn't you?" I pressed. "You told the bank she would cover the payments using the money she got from you. But the payments weren't made. And now the bank is looking for full repayment of the principal from both co-signers. Not just you, Victor. Sylvie is equally liable for that debt." His face drained of color. He reached for his phone, his hands shaking violently. He typed a furious, clipped message. I heard the muffled thunk of his phone hitting the floor. "She blocked me," he whispered, staring at the screen. "She actually blocked me." "Of course she did," I said, a wave of bitter satisfaction washing over me. "She blamed you for poking the bear. Now she knows the bear is a financial monster, and you put her on the hook for its food." His mind raced, a visible scramble of panic and self-pity. He had been so focused on getting his $185,000 extortion money from me that he hadn't considered the full, catastrophic depth of the debt he was facing with Sylvie. "If you don't sign this paper by 4 p.m., I continued, pushing the deed toward him on the nearest bare wall, "the house sale collapses. The buyer walks. The court order stands, But the process stalls for months. You get no money. The bank comes after you for the full principal, and they go after Sylvie for the same amount. She has no job, no assets, and she will face collection on the principal. Your new life is instantly bankrupt, and the house, this empty shell, still belongs to us, a joint disaster you can't escape. The air was so tight, I could hear the desperate hitch in his breathing. You have 2 hours, Victor, I said, looking directly into his eyes, not with fury, but with the flat professional clarity of a former bank executive. Sign the corrected quitclaim deed, the sale proceeds. You get your half of the equity after your debts, and the USD 800 pension fraud are accounted for. The boat is repossessed, but your personal liability for the full principal debt is cleared by the closing proceeds. You walk away with cash, a ruined credit score, but no further financial disaster. And Sylvie, well, she walks away with the full liability for the principal and no house. Victor looked from the paper to the floor, to the ghostly white walls. He was being asked to trade his mistress's financial future for his own immediate solvency. He was being asked to choose between love and survival. For a man like Victor, it wasn't a hard choice. She co-signed, he muttered, the words tasting like ash. She said she had money. She lied, Victor, I replied, just like you lied to me. Only my lie, the one that allowed you to believe I was weak, was the one that protected me. He snatched the pen from my hand. His knuckles were white. He signed the paper with a violent, shaky flourish, slamming the pen down on the dry wall with a dull thud. It's done, he breathed, sinking onto the floor, defeated. I picked up the deed, folded it cleanly, and slid it into my satchel. Yes, it is. The clock on the wall read 3:45 p.m., 15 minutes to spare. I was halfway to the front door when his phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar local number. Victor picked it up, his voice weak. Hello? Yes. Vance. The boat? Yes, I signed the deed. You're still calling? Why? I just sold the collateral. I don't understand. He held the phone away from his ear, staring at me with the vacant expression of a man realizing he missed the finer print. I stood perfectly still, watching the final consequence land. What did they say? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Victor hung up the phone. His eyes were wide with a terror I had never seen, not even when his mother was sick. They said the sale clears my joint liability for the overdue payments on the boat, but it doesn't clear the full principal of the original loan from Thorne Innovations because Sylvie is the primary on the LLC and a verified co-signer. The $5,000 financial block on the LLC account prevented them from collecting the full principal before the closing. The bank is now going to pursue both of us, but they have a clearer path to Sylvie because I signed the quitclaim deed, which proves I transferred my interest in the joint asset to another party. He looked up at me, his eyes begging for mercy. Elara, they said that the bank just filed a lien against the LLC. The boat is gone, but the debt remains. The only one walking away fully protected is you. I did not flinch. I'm just claiming what's mine, Victor. That includes peace. I walked out of the empty house, leaving him kneeling alone in the sterile, beige room. I closed the door softly, deliberately. The lock clicked, solid and final. The house was sold. The money was secured. But the financial war was far from over, because the bank's next target was the only person left with assets, Sylvie. The house closed on time. The 2-week period was agonizingly fast, but it put the nail in the coffin of Victor and Sylvie's delusion. They officially vacated the property 3 hours before the closing, leaving it clean but completely impersonal, like a cheap motel room. 2 days later, the wire transfer landed in my new account. It was a staggering sum. The full amount of the equity, $370,000, which was my share plus the settlement from Victor's hidden assets and the small USD 800 pension fund retrieval. I looked at the number on the screen, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt heavy, quiet peace. This wasn't revenge money. It was restitution for 27 years of silent servitude. I used a small portion to buy my new condo outright, a small place with a garden view 2 states away. The rest went into long-term investments. My financial planner, the sharp woman with the pearl earrings, smiled. This money will outlive the betrayal, Alara. That's the real win. Victor tried to reach me one last time, not through a lawyer, but through Leo. Dad called, Leo said, his voice flat. He's staying at a cheap hotel near River Park. He asked if you'd be willing to loan him part of the money for a deposit on a rental. He said Sylvie is gone. She went back to her sister in a different state. Tell your father that I don't make loans to strangers, I instructed, and that Sylvie is facing the collection calls on the principal he co-signed her into. The house sale didn't save her. Leo hesitated. Mom, I saw her social media. She didn't just leave him. She posted a long, vague rant. Something about being dragged down by narcissistic financial ruin and how she was lied to about assets and liabilities. It's gone viral in their circle. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Sylvie was destroying Victor's carefully constructed social facade, confirming every rumor about their financial chaos. The humiliation was now public. Did she mention the $12,500 air filtration system? I asked, the question sharp and immediate. No, Leo admitted, but she said something about a fraudulent investment that cost her everything, and how she should have known better than to trust a man who drove his wife into the ground for $12,500 in false promises. It's the closest she's come to admitting she was wrong. Victor had been ruined by the private legal moves I made. Sylvie was ruined by her own very public, bitter, and vague admissions. Leo finally let down his guard. I want to say thank you, Mom. I was silent for too long. I thought you were just playing petty games, but you were fighting a battle I couldn't even see. You don't have to fight, Leo, I said softly. You just have to be free. I did something small, something restorative. I remembered Leo had mentioned a massive overdue student loan payment, just a few $1,000s, a constant source of stress for him. I didn't tell him I was doing it. I simply executed a small wire transfer to his university account, an amount exactly equal to $9,350, clearing the balance. He cried when he saw the confirmation email. Mom, you didn't have to. I did, I interrupted. That's what a family does. We don't steal from each other to cover our mistakes. We protect each other from the fallout of other people's greed. The phone line went silent for a moment. Then he whispered, I love you. The weight of months of silent judgment lifted from my shoulders. The true restoration was in that single, heartfelt phrase. Later that week, I opened my inbox and found an email I hadn't expected. It was from Sylvie's old work address, the one she used at accounting. It was not a plea for money. It was a threat. Alara, you may have won the house and Victor is a fool, but you didn't get everything. He hid the real asset. The $12,500 was just the down payment. There's something criminal under the surface, and I have the proof. If I go down, he goes down for tax fraud, and I will send you the evidence to finish him. You're not the only one who knows how to destroy a man's future. I will see you both pay for this. I stared at the screen, the air in my quiet condo suddenly sharp with cold dread. $12,500 was just the down payment. Victor had a bigger secret, something potentially criminal, And Sylvie, burning with the pain of her own debt, was ready to turn state's evidence. I hadn't just cashed out. I had accidentally stumbled into a criminal conspiracy. The silence was broken by the frantic typing of Sylvie on the other side of the country. The email from Sylvie was a match struck in a dark room. It confirmed my worst suspicion. Victor's financial desperation went beyond just hiding assets from a divorce. It touched the realm of criminal fraud. I immediately forwarded the email to Anya. She says the $12,500 air filtration system was only a down payment on a bigger asset, and she's threatening to expose Victor for tax fraud. Anya, who was already celebrating the finalized wire transfer, went quiet. Tax fraud changes everything, Ela. That puts this into the public domain, a place neither of us wanted to go. We needed to know the true purpose of the $12,500 investment and what asset it was tied to. I reached out to Janice, my old Riverbank contact, again. This was a bigger risk, a direct query on potential criminal activity, but I had no choice. Janice, I said over a secure line, I need you to look up the final recipient of the $12,500 payment Victor made from the LLC. Was it an equipment company or something else? Janice called me back an hour later, her voice tight with panic. Alara, I shouldn't be telling you this. The money went to a specialized medical equipment supplier, MediTrust. But the paperwork. Victor filed the purchase order, the one for the filtration unit, under a medical exemption claim. He listed it as an essential tax-exempt purchase for respiratory necessity, tied to his late mother's estate. My stomach turned over. His mother, the woman I cared for 2 years without complaint. Victor had used her memory, her final illness, to commit fraud. He used his deceased mother's medical history as a cover for a business purchase? I asked, the words hollow. Yes, Janice confirmed. He claimed the purchase was for necessary filtration required by a dependent to reduce his taxes and secure a separate, low-interest, tax-exempt line of credit for the full cost of the equipment. The full cost listed was $150,000. $150,000. The $12,500 was just the fraudulent down payment to initiate the tax dodge and secure the massive loan. Victor wasn't hiding a business. He was setting up a shell corporation, Thorn Innovations, to funnel an illegal tax-exempt loan meant for medical necessity into his pocket. And the collateral he likely used? The house itself, before he filed for divorce. I realized the gravity of the twist. The initial betrayal of cheating was petty. The financial asset hiding was expected. But this was criminal tax fraud, using his dead mother as the shield. I immediately informed Anya. He secured a fraudulent $150,000 loan using his mother's medical history. Sylvie must have the proof of the tax filings. Anya's voice was grim. If she files that evidence, Victor is facing jail time, not just divorce court. And since Sylvie co-signed the LLC and the debt, she faces liability too. This is why she's threatening him. She wants her name cleared from the Thorn Innovations LLC and the USD 8,000 debt. We were holding a loaded gun, and Sylvie had her finger on the trigger. I had to choose. Do I use this nuclear threat to destroy Victor completely, or do I use it for one final, clean financial closure? I chose closure. I had Anya draft a new legal document, a simple one-page agreement. Victor must sign over all remaining future rights to his entire pension fund, including the future growth of the portion I didn't initially retrieve. In exchange, I would guarantee the silence regarding the $150,000 tax fraud and ensure that Sylvie's incriminating emails never saw the light of day. Before we could file, Victor showed up at my new condo. I hadn't given him the address, but he must have tracked my car registration or hired a private investigator. He looked worse than he did in the empty house. Disheveled, thin, and terrified. I opened the door, but did not let him in. He stood on the welcome mat of the home that was entirely mine. "Alara," he pleaded, his voice ragged. "I got Sylvie's emails. I know what she's threatening. Please. She's crazy. She'll ruin me for the rest of my life. I already lost the boat. I lost the house. I lost everything. Please don't let her do this." "You did this, Victor," I stated, the air between us thick with finality. "You used your mother's death as a cover for $150,000 in fraud. You dragged Sylvie into your financial pit. You're begging me to protect you from the woman you chose over me." He looked at the floor, his shoulders slumping. "I was stupid. I thought the house was the only thing you cared about. I thought you'd take the money and vanish." "I took the money," I said, "and I did not vanish. I became the only one who can save you now, Victor. Not from me, but from the consequences of your own criminal greed." I held out the one-page pension agreement. "Sign this. Sign over every future cent of your pension to me. You walk away with nothing but your job, a ruined credit score, and silence. Or you don't sign. I hand this evidence to the IRS, and you walk away with jail time and the full USD 8,000 debt to the bank." Victor reached for the paper, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He was facing a choice between penance and prison. The ultimate price of his betrayal was staring him down. "Where's the notary?" he whispered, desperate to make the choice final before Sylvie moved on her threat. "I called one," I replied, pointing to a dark sedan pulling up to the curb. "They'll be here in 3 minutes. And Victor, after you sign this, you never, ever contact me or Leo again. You cease to exist in our lives." Victor stared at the approaching notary car. He signed the pension document with a final, desperate scratch of the pen, knowing the future silence was the most expensive gift I could ever give him. He finally understood that I didn't want revenge. I wanted his total, legal, and final disappearance. Victor signed the pension documents, transferring all future claims and interests to me. The notary witnessed it, stamped it, and left as silently as she arrived. The transaction was clean, legal, and absolute. When it was over, Victor stood on my stoop, completely empty. He didn't argue. He didn't even say goodbye. He just looked at me, a profound look of defeat in his eyes, and walked away toward the waiting taxi. He was a ghost, erased from my life by the stroke of a pen. The immediate threat from Sylvie also dissolved. Once she realized Victor had no assets left to leverage, and that I was protecting him from the tax fraud charges, she stopped emailing. She had been left alone with the full USD 8,000 principal debt from the co-signed loan and the ruined credit score that came with it. She had bet on a quick climb using Victor's presumed wealth. She was now picking up the pieces of his destruction. I didn't hear from either of them again, and that was the victory. With the house sold and the pension rights secured, my financial life was fully restored and protected. I took the remaining large portion of the $370,000, the money I had earned and the money I had reclaimed, and made good on a promise I made to myself. I took $50,000 and anonymously donated it to a women's legal aid foundation that specialized in helping older women escape financially abusive marriages. The fund director, a kind woman I never met in person, wrote in their newsletter that the donation helped 3 women secure legal counsel for partition actions and asset discovery, changing their lives forever. That, I realized, was the true definition of power. Not just surviving the storm, but using the energy of the disaster to light the path for others. I finally found my own place, a small but sun-drenched condo. Everything in it was new, fully mine, with no echoes of Victor's footsteps or Sylvie's entitled laughter. I picked up a part-time job at the local library, a quiet, contemplative place where stories were respected, not thrown away. One afternoon, I was sitting on my new patio, overlooking the peaceful garden, when my friend Anya came to visit. She brought a housewarming gift. It was a large ceramic coffee mug. On the side, in bold, cheerful script, it read, "Unbothered and paid." She toasted me with a glass of iced tea. "You did what most people only dream of doing, Alara. You made them feel what they made you feel. Powerless, exposed, and ultimately erased." I took a slow sip. I wasn't the kind of woman to scream or throw things, Anya. I was the kind of woman who signed documents with a steady hand and waited for the legal process to deliver the consequence. I don't think about what I lost anymore. I think about what I reclaimed. My dignity, my financial security, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing the game is truly over. Victor and Sylvie had a choice. They could have been decent, honest people who honored their past. Instead, they chose to humiliate me and steal my future. They bet that my silence meant I was weak. They bet wrong. They thought they could move their new life into my house and treat me like a footnote. All I did was remind them, legally, financially, and finally, criminally, who they were dealing with. They walked away with nothing but the debt they accrued together and the knowledge that the quiet woman they discarded was the one who held the pen that wrote the ending. I set my mug down on the table, the word paid glinting in the sunlight. I never answer blocked calls. I sleep well. And the silence around me is no longer loneliness. It is absolute freedom. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you are here.